Hello guys, you're welcome to another video in this series, and in this video we are going to be working on the registration aspect of this application, basically registering a new user. So as you can see, I've already done npm start to kickstart our React application, and I've already done php artisan serve to start our Laravel application. And here we have our React application and our Laravel application. And heading back here, the first thing I'd like to do first of all is that if I come over here and I click here, you can see nothing actually happens. And the reason for that is because this is a button. So we want to add a type here of submit. And if I click here, you're going to see it refreshes the browser. Then not just that it refreshes the browser, it does not validate anything. So what I can do here is to validate a couple of things here. So basically, we want all to be required. So everything has to be imputed before that submits. So this is going to be required. And I'm going to copy that and save that. So we have first name required. We have this required. Let me just close this. So we have first name required. We have last name required. We have email required. We have password to required. For our form, we want to remove this no validate so that this works, because with no validate, it's not going to validate. But with validate, is going to make sure that our form is validated before it gets to submit our form. So now I head back to our React application. I click here. You can see first name required. Just get anything in here, click here, please fill it. If I then get in here and start entering something, and it's by passing the email. That's because we have not set a type for our email here, so we're going to set the type to the email, and now save that, and that should just be, let me get in here, last name, email, click. Why is it not? It's supposed to be validating our email for us, so let me just be sure. Oh, sorry, that's the mistake. So we save that, first name, last name, and if I click on submit, please fill out this field, and you can see please include this ampersand sign, password, and it's telling us that the email is wrong. So now let's head back to our application. And now that we are sure that our form is now validating, the first thing we want to do is we want to set up a couple of things in our services folder, basically to be able to communicate with our API. So here in our, let's go to services. Yep, in our services folder, I'm going to create one here, a file here called http service.js. http service.js is basically going to serve as a foundation for every other thing we're going to be doing in this application. Basically, every communication with our endpoint or our API. So this is going to be a class, all right, class of HTTP service. And for this class of HTTP service, we're going to have a variable here that's going to be called URL. And this URL is going to be the URL of, or basically it's going to communicate to the port of this application. So I'm going to paste that in here, /API. So once we've declared this URL, the first function is going to be post data. And basically what this function is going to help us do is whenever we want to post any data down to our endpoint, we're going to make use of this particular function. You're going to see what I am actually saying. And this is going to be an asynchronous function here. And we're going to pass two parameters. The first parameter is going to be the item, and the second parameter is going to be what I call added URL. And you're going to see how useful these two things, or what we are going to be using them for. So right here, the first thing we want to do is to get the token from our local storage. So const token, and this is an await because this is a promise. So we're going to say local storage, right? Dot get. All right. So here we're going to be using local storage. You could maybe, dot get item. Sorry. You could use cookie, you could use local storage, or you could even store this as a variable within your application. So local storage just get item, we're going to have user. And once we've done that, we can now say let's request. So we want to set our request options. And our request option for this is going to contain a couple of things. First of all, it's going to contain the method, it's going to contain the header, and it's going to contain the body. So for our method, this is a post request. And for our headers, we're going to have two main headers. The first is going to be authorization, and we're going to need the token here. And the second header is going to be content type, and content type, this would be application/JSON. All right, so having set this, the last is going to be the body, right? And our body would be JSON stringify. We want to JSON stringify, and we're going to JSON stringify the item. The item basically is the data that is going to pass from our application down to our endpoint or down to our API. Once this is done, we can now say return. And I said when we began this tutorial that we are going to be using the fetch API, not Axios, basically. So why is this crying an error? Because we have to get this out of the way. So let's get this out of here. And this is where this function ends. This is for this header. So I'm going to get this here. And we're going to return our fetch API. And our fetch API will first take the URL and then the request options. So for the URL, we're going to say this is the URL. And that's /API. Then we're going to add a slash. And then we are going to call added URL. Added URL is going to basically be the added endpoints after /API. Let's say we wanted to log in. It's going to be the added URL is going to be user/login or something like that. So, and then the second parameter we're going to pass is going to be our request options. And then we can now use then, since this returns a promise, and we're going to have a response. Say we're going to convert this response to JSON. So it's going to be response to JSON. All right, so now that should do for post data. The next is going to be get data. Get data. Get data is also going to follow the same pattern as the post data. Except that here we are not going to have any item. We are only going to have just the added URL since you don't pass data in get. Yep, so we have an async. We have added URL here. And now this. So what we can do here is to get the token here too. So await local storage dot get item. Get item, we want to get the user. Now that we have the user, we can now say, let me just copy this request options. And in fact, I'm going to copy everything here. And we're just going to make just a few modifications, paste that here. So our method here is going to be get, right? Our headers, authorization, token, content type, application/JSON. And here there will be nobody since it's a get request. And I think that is just about that. We have added URL, and that is just about that. All right, so now once we have succeeded in doing this, we're going to export this. So we're going to say export default HTTP service. So now that we have this set, we are going to create another service again, and this service is going to be called auth service. Auth service.js, right? Yep. So in our auth service.js, we are first of all going to import the HTTP service, and this is going to come from our HTTP service, right? So let me HTTP service. The first function here is going to be called sign up service. So we're going to export that automatically. So export const sign up service, and our sign up service is going to take the credentials, which is going to be the data that will be passed from our application. So we're going to pass the credentials, and we're going to instantiate HTTP service inside of this function. So const HTTP, not HTTP Apple element, HTTP service. And now we can just log this to the console.log HTTP service, just for debugging purposes. We can then say return HTTP. All right, we want to use post data since this is for signing up. So the post data. Why does it not recognize this function? Let me just be sure. HTTP dot, let's see, get data, post data. So let's copy this. I wonder why there's no IntelliSense for that. So dot post data, and we're going to pass the parameters which we required. The first is going to be the credentials, and then the second is going to be what we are going to call sign up URL, and we are going to define that here. So we are going to say let sign up URL. Let's sign up URL be equal to user/register. All right, and http.post data credentials sign up URL, and of course this is going to return the promise. So we're going to have .then, and .then is going to take data, and not just that, we are also going to console.log data and return data too. So console.log JSON stringify our data. So let's log a JSON stringified version of our data, stringified data, and we are going to return this data. Okay, and here we want to just be sure that there are no errors. So we're going to catch every error and return the error to the console. So console.log error. And what we can now do straight off is to head straight into our register application. So now we have basically set this up. So let's head back into our register application. And now let's get this data, the email, the username, and the password. So how to do that right straight up is that we would need a method here. And this method is going to be called handle submit. And handle submit we'll pass the event here, and we're going to say e.prevent default. So basically what we are doing here is to prevent the application from submitting by itself, and once the submit button is actually being clicked. And now if I save that and I head back to application, let's just be sure about that. If I click on submit, you can see, okay, let me fill this form and be sure that that works. At mail.com and enter the password. And if I click on that, oh, sorry guys, it actually submits application because we have not attached the event handler here. So let's do that quickly by saying on submit. On submit is going to have an event, say this that handle submit. And now if I save that, let's log this to the console.log. I'm going to say submit button has been clicked. Save that again. Now get back to application. This, and email, just try something. Password, let's get to the console. Now if I click register, submit button has been clicked. You can see that we have successfully disabled that by event.prevent default. The next thing we want to do is we would want to find a way to be able to get the input values, and we can do that by simply making use of states in class-based components. To be able to declare states in class-based components, one of the most effective ways is to do that inside of the constructor of the class. So in our constructor, I like to first of all pass props here. We can now set the states in our constructor. I like to do that. So these are the states. We're going to say a couple of things here. The first is going to be the email. So yep, we have an email field here. We also have first name field here too. We also have last name, right? We also have email, first name, last name, and password. So we have set, or we have defined the state here. How do we actually set the state? So there are so many ways we can actually do this inside here, inside this text field. Basically, we can just create individual functions for each of them to set them. But the fastest way to do that would simply be to set an onChange handler on each of them here, like this, and say an onChange. And the onChange is going to call a function that I would like to call handle change. And this handle change is going to handle any change on this event, any change on this text field. So let's pass that through. We have first name, we have last name, and then we have for email, and we have for password. And now that we have set this, we want to define this handle change function. So to do that, we are going to say handle change. And for handle change function, we're going to set the state. So we're going to use the set state function. And you can see that the set state function takes the state as well as a callback function. And remember here that we have already declared the state in our constructor. And of course, we know that once the class is called, the constructor is usually one of the first things that is also being called. So what we can do here now is, since we know that these are the states that are available to us, the email, the first name, the last name, and the password, we can then target the individual ID properties of each and every one of these components. And we're going to hand them IDs here. We're going to get rid of this ID, this single ID outline full width. We're going to get rid of that ID. And what we can do is we are going to make use of that particular ID here in our state. So what I can do here is I'm going to say this is the set state. And this is going to be an array because we are targeting all these components with handle change event attached to them. So we are going to be using their ID, and we are going to be matching their ID to our target value. All right, so either target dot value. So basically what this is going to do is that it's going to get this ID, is going to check out for this ID, match this ID to this value, and wherever we have this state set, let's say for example we have email set here, it's going to it's going to transform the value of this email to match the value of this, to match this either targeted value. So let's say for example we had let's say here we had an ID, say here, of first name, and let's just get rid of all this. So this one, the ID is going to be last name, and this, the ID would be email, and this, the ID would be password. All right, so now what it's going to simply do for us here is that once we call this, every single time there's a change event on this particular component here, or let's say for example there's a change on first name, the onChange event handler is going to map this particular state in an array, and the value of this state is going to be the same with the value of the ID of the component. That's why we are calling this the set the state. We are setting the state of this component, and the state of this component must be, or whatever is the value of this state, like say state dot the email value must match the target ID, and then we are going to pass the value to be stored in the state. All right, so now having done that, we can just save this, and what I am going to do now is, once this button is being clicked, once the submit button is being clicked here, I am going to console.log this states. Let's head back to application, and it's telling us reference error, must call super constructor in derived class for accessing this return. Must call super constructor. Oh my goodness, how could I have forgotten this? Oh guys, please forgive me. Whenever you want to use this state, you have to call the super global variable, and of course we'll have to call the super here and pass the props. So now if I save that, now that error should go. Yep, now that error no longer exists. So now if I go to inspect element, so here we are having a couple of errors. Said invalid prop type, invalid prop required of type string, supplied to forward ref, text field, expected boolean. All right, so let's just fix that. But before we fix that, let me just show you what exactly I mean. Now let's get this first name, right? Last name. Let's get the email. And now let's get this password. Now if I click on submit, you can see it passes that to the state. You can see our email, our first name, our last name, our password has been passed down to the state. So now that you have actually seen how we can transfer data from our objects down to our state in class-based components, we are now going to head straight to fix this error. So now let's head down to application. The major reason actually why this is showing that error and saying required is not blah blah blah, invalid prop type required of type string, is because we made a mistake here by saying required. So basically this is not needed. So I'm just going to do a control F2 and get rid of all of them, and I'll save that, and that should do just about that. So we removed all the required. So now if I head back here, and we still have an error that says does not recognize the validate. Okay, so let's just remove the validate, and even without this validate it should still work because this is a form in HTML5. So yep, it's still working. So now let's just enter the first name, enter the email, last name, sorry, but let's just copy that. The email, enter the password, click on submit. You can see now that it passes the state as an object for us to our console. We are now going to make use of Redux here. And how we are going to go about that is really simple. We're going to import connect. Connect is actually a higher order component. So we're going to call the connect higher order function. And this is going to come from react-redux. And we are going to wrap our component around this higher order component. But before we do that, we would need to, first of all, create the action for this. So let's just get back to actions, and we are going to create our auth action. So auth action JS. So right in our auth action, we are going to import a couple of things here. So we're going to import from our services, from our auth service, services, right? Services slash, we want to import our auth service. And what we want to import from our Auth service basically is the sign up service. We are going to define our action here, and we want to export this. Am I making that? All right, so export is going to be a constant, and I want to call this sign up basically, and this is going to pass the credentials here, and we're going to log to the console our credentials here. All right, and the first thing I want to check is if the password, so if the password which is coming from our credentials, so if the length of the password, credentials.password the length, if the length is less than 6, we are going to dispatch something, and that thing is what is called a reducer. So we're going to dispatch, sorry, not a reducer, sorry, it's called an action. So we're going to dispatch an action here of, say, short password. So the standard convention of defining actions are usually with capital letters, and if you want to differentiate in between them, use underscore. So we're going to dispatch an action here that is going to be called short password. And if we have seen that everything is perfectly fine, we have already imported this from our Auth service. So we're going to use that sign up service. Okay, so sign up service dot, right? Oh, sorry, not dot. We need to pass the credentials here. So the credentials, and this is actually returning a promise. So that then, and this is going to get our response. Okay, and we can just console.log our response here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say if our response the token, so basically if the token, or let me just see first of all, let me not be assuming things here. Let's go back to Auth controller, head down a bit here, and during registration, when the user registers, we usually log the user in, right? And that usually returns the token for us, right? Yep. So success true token is JWT token. So yeah, that's true. So if the token is not null, so basically if the token exists, we are going to store that in our local storage. So local storage just set item, and you can see set item takes a key and takes the value. So our key is going to be user, as we have seen in our Auth service here when we did, not here in our HTTP service, sorry, where we actually did .get item, we are getting the user. So the key is going to be user for our local storage. And as I said, we would need to pass the bearer and our token, so rest.token, which is passed from our API down to our React application. And now once this is done, we want to dispatch another action here, and that action is going to be of type success. So we're going to say sign up success. And now that this is done, we can now say else if it returns no token, that means this the something went wrong. Basically, we are going to dispatch a type here of, say, code error, right? Basically what that means is we're going to say maybe either there was a problem, maybe username invalid, email invalid, or just some error, so code error, and we're going to return the response. And here we are also going to find an error, just in case if there's any error around here. We want to dispatch another action, but usually it rarely gets to this level. But just in case if there's any unseen error that we know nothing about, so we're going to just dispatch another action here. And that action is going to be of type, I'm going to call this, let me call this code error. That means I'm going to call this sign up error. Sign up error. And this is just going to be code error, just in case if there's any error. And what I am missing here is this. And this is going to be of type sign up error. And we can pass the error message. Okay, so now that we have successfully written our action for sign up, or dispatch the action for sign up, we want to head back straight into our reducers folder, because we have not created anything in our reducers folder. Oh yeah, we've actually created. So right here, we are now going to do some manipulation here. And the reason why we are going to do something here in our reducer is because we will need to display some message to our user here, like say maybe login credentials, blah, blah, blah. Just display a message to the user here. Maybe email incorrect, or maybe login was successful and stuff like that. So in order for us to do that, what we are going to do here now is our initial state here would be an object. And for that object, we're going to have auth error. So basically what auth error is going to do for us is just going to tell us that it's going to be like what is going to be the reducer object that is going to be called in our register component. All right, so we're going to check for the presence of auth error, check for the value of auth error, and then know what message to display to the user. Okay, so now that we have done this, what we can now do is here we have actually defined our reducer, and we're going to get rid of this because now we have things to work with. So I'm going to go with a switch here, switch statement, and I'm going to say if the type of the action that is being dispatched is we're going to do a case here. So if the type, sorry, we don't need this. So if the type of the action that is being dispatched is, let's get back to our register. Sorry, not register, auth actions, and here we are dispatching the actions. So if the type of action that is being dispatched here is short password, all right, so if the type of the action that is being dispatched is short action password, we want to log to the console.log. We're going to log the action, and not just that we are going to log the action, we are also going to return, and we are going to destructure the state. And after destructuring the state, and of course destructuring is something that comes with ES6. It's basically just a way of saying split all the objects within this object, all the basically the values within this object, and I want to get just a single of them. So now we're now going to get auth error, and for short password, for password being too short, we want to display a message to the user, and it's going to say password is too short. That's not all. We are also going to get to another case also, and the second case is going to be based on the second action that is going to be dispatched, which is sign up success. So basically, if the user signs up successfully here, let me copy this, we are going to go back to our auth action. Oh, sorry, we're going to come back here. We're going to bring up a new case. So this case would then pass sign up success, and as usual, I'm going to log the action to the console, and we are also going to destructure our state again, and I am going to get the auth error value, and I am going to set the auth error value to null. So basically there was no error, so that means that there's no authentication error. Or should we leave it this way? No, I think let's change this to auth response, not auth error. So this is going to be auth response, so that if password is too short, our auth response is going to say password is too short. If sign up successful, our auth response is going to say sign up was successfully done, and then we can save that. And now if there is another, if we have sign up error, so what I'm going to do now is not to get into typing this, I'm going to copy this, paste that. Sorry, I don't like this being paste that here. So now sign up success, the next is going to be, after sign up success, the next is going to be sign up error and sign up, and this is supposed to be code error, not sign up error, code error. So for sign up error, and we're going to say our action.error.message, and of course this message is going to be the error message. So for the last one, which is basically an unknown error, so we're going to call this code error. So this is just an unknown error. So for an unknown error that we have no idea about, I am just going to say there seems to be a problem, please try again later. Seems to be a problem, please try again later. And now that we have succeeded in setting up our reducer response right here, and our action and all the responses that we will be getting, why did I call this auth response? Let me change this to auth response. Control F2 and auth. So now that we have successfully done this, we can now head back to our component. And remember, we have already imported connect, which is a higher order component that is going to wrap our register component. So what we can do, and this is actually imported from react-redux. So what we are going to do now is to import our sign up, and this is going to come from our store. And in our store, we have our actions, and we're going to import our auth action. And having imported our auth action, we are going to come to this handle submit. So once this is submitted, we're going to do this dot props dot sign up. So I'm going to pass this dot state until we have mapped our state to our props, and we have also dispatched this action by mapping our dispatch to also our props, the props of this particular component, and then we have also wrapped it around our connect higher order component. This whole thing that we just did right now is not going to work. So now let's just get straight into it. And the first thing we want to do first is we want to first of all map our state to our props. So we're going to say const map state to props, map state. Oh, this is for view. So map state, sorry guys, to props, and this is going to take the state, and we are going to return auth error here, and this auth error would store the value of our state dot auth. All right, dot auth error. Let me just explain this a bit before I move any further. So we are creating a value here, or a variable here called auth error, and we are assigning this value, or this value here, the current state property of auth error in our store. And if I go to our root reducer, you can see we instantiated this as auth, and then we pass that into our app.js. Sorry, not app.js, our index.js. Here, our root reducer. So basically what we are doing here is we are creating auth error, and we are saying we want the value of the current value of our state.auth error to be mapped to this auth error. And if I go down to not our auth actions, our reducer, you can see, okay, sorry, not auth error, it's supposed to be auth response. So let me quickly do that, get to our register component and change this to Control F2 to auth response. So basically we are creating this auth response, and we're storing the value of whatever value our current state of that's our current store has this auth response. If it's blank, it's going to be blank. Whatever is the value, we are doing that. And what is actually enabling us to be able to match this our particular state in our store to this particular props is this function here called map state to props. And the second function we are going to call is going to be map dispatch to props. And the reason why we are using map dispatch to props is because we have a function here from our auth action, which is called the sign up function, and this particular function dispatches a couple of actions for us. Here it dispatches 1, 2, 3, and 4 different actions, and those 4 different actions we need them inside of our register component. So I am now going to say const map dispatch to props, dispatch, I hope I make no typos here. So map dispatch to props, and this is going to take a value. I'm going to call that value dispatch. And why is this telling me some error? That's because this is supposed to be outside of this. So map state to props and map dispatch to props. And what is the problem here? Why are we getting this error? And that's because of this comma. So I'm just going to remove this comma now. And now we're going to use map dispatch to props. And this map dispatch to props, just like the map state to props, it matches our action. So it's going to map this or whatever action that we want to use. We want to use this sign up here, and we want to map the sign up to a value we are going to create here, which is going to be called, or a function we're going to create here, which is going to be called sign up. And it is going to have a couple of parameters, which is going to be the credentials. And we want to basically map this to the sign up function that we imported here. So this sign up function that we imported here. And because we have been able to map this dispatch to props, that is the reason why we can then say this.props.signup. All right. So that has been added to the property of this component. And the way that is being done is when we call this connect higher order component, which wraps that, the connect higher order component does that for us. So we are going to call we're going to call sign up function, and it takes the credentials. So I'm just going to pass creds, which is the credentials here. That is just about that. Why is that throwing an error? Because we did not return this So I'm going to return this and cut this and paste that in here. Okay, so now that we have these two functions ready, what we can now do is we want to export this, and we are going to wrap this around the higher order component called connect. And this connect is going to take a couple of parameters, and the parameters are going to be the state to props, the dispatch to props, map dispatch to props, and we can then pass the name of the component, and our component is actually called, was it sign up or register? Register, right? Register, yes. So here we are, and now what we can do is head down to application and check out. We have a problem here, export default connect. It says this error is occurred build time. And why did we export? Oh, sorry guys. So let's get rid of this export. And now if I save that and it's refresh that, dispatch is not defined. Search for keyword on line 7. And where are we getting this? This is actually coming from Auth action on line 7. So let's go to Auth action on line 7. And it is saying that dispatch is not defined. Oh, sorry guys. And that is because of we did not return this. So we need to return this. And in returning this, we could pass dispatch. All right. And that should do now. Let's just, and honestly, I don't know. Right. Yes. Here. So that can allow us. So if I save that and I head back here, reducer auth returned undefined during initialization. If the state passed to the reducer, the problem is, let's get back to our auth reducer. We actually forgot to return the state when we are doing no manipulation. So we have to return the state here. So now if everything is fine, now let's try to register a new user. And let me go to my DB first, so that PHP my admin, and let me root. No. So we have contact manager tutorial, and we have users. And so I'm going to enter a name here, a last name, Brad V, an email, bradv@mail.com. And let's just get a password. If I click on this, it tells us if rest the token not equal to null, and then it tells us cause error. So let us go. Let me see. I think I can just sense what could be causing that. So right in our headers, let me see. Oh, here we are. So let's just get rid of this body and paste that here. All right. And now let's try that again. So let's enter Rabiot, the last name, Bresvas, email, bresvas@mail.com, and let's enter the password. Sorry. If I click on register, yep, you can see it returns a dispatch type of success, and it also returns a JWT token. And if I come here and I click on this, you can see bresvas@mail.com. So we have successfully saved Bresvas. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show the response message here for us to see. But let's just have this boot tag here. So what we're going to do now is we are going to destructure here. We're going to destructure the property of the props that is available to this particular component. Remember, we assigned that props here by map state to props auth response. So we want to destructure that right inside of our render method just before we return anything. And we are going to destructure this auth response, and this is going to come from the props that has been mapped to this component. And now that we have auth response available to us, in our bold tag here, all right, in our bold tag here, what I want to do now is simply to say if it is empty, then display nothing. So basically, if auth response is not equal to null, right, and auth response is not empty. So basically, if it's not null and it's not an empty string, then we basically want to display auth response. So if it's not null and it's not empty, display auth response, or just display null. So don't show anything. If I get back to our application, let's register a new user. Let's call this Brendan. Call this Rogers. Brendan. Let's call this Rogers. mail.com, password, save, and yep, sign up was successfully done. We can further make that a bit better by coming down here and adding a break tag. And that should do. That's just about that for this video, guys. See you in the next video.